All right. Thanks for joining us on Halo Labs. I'm privileged here to have Brad with Portal Insurance. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Excited.
of course, of
It's a
course.
nice way
Yeah,
to start a Monday.
yeah, for sure. I'd much rather do this than some of the other stuff we could be getting into. But we had a conversation in the past, and I really appreciate you jumping on before and doing this again. So, in order to get going, I'd really, really love to jump into story and background, essentially. Who are you? Who is Brad? How did we get into this? I know you mentioned your college story. I really like that. So, if we could get into that and just kind of give our listeners something to know you by.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in kind of a country town population, like 8,000 people. I think it's still 8,000 people. And I got into golf when I was 16 years old. Not what people typically picture when they think young kid getting into golf. This wasn't like, going to the country club with dad and my, pleated khakis and Richie Rich friends. It was nothing like that. This was a golf course that would let you wear jeans, and anybody who plays golf knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And but I got into golf when I turned 16, and thankfully it was that and not other things like what some of my friends were getting into, and because there's not a lot to do in a small town. And I got into golf, and I've talked to a lot of insurance people over the years, and you never meet one that's like, "Oh yeah, as a kid, I wanted to sell insurance," but I actually did because the two guys who played the most golf at the course that I played at were both insurance agents. Um, One of them has since passed away. The other one's out of the business completely, and neither one of them were like super successful. But that was my like North Star. So fast forward a little bit. When you come from like a blue collar background, sometimes like breaking into white collar type jobs there
Tough,
can
right?
be difficult. And so I decided when I was going to college. So I played golf in college briefly, and I decided that when I went to college. I wanted so the first few years when I was playing golf, my major was eligibility. For those of you who've ever played college sports, that's a funny joke because my major was literally what the classes kept me eligible. Um, After I stopped playing golf, I had to pick a major, and I picked education. I wanted to be a teacher, and the sole reason I wanted to be a teacher was you got summers off, which
Summers
is like
off.
the worst reason to be a teacher. So it's going to play golf in the summer. And you get off at basically 3 or 4 o'clock every day. You got a couple
Perfect.
hours. Even when it gets dark early, you got an hour or two to go. Hit 9 holes or something. And I was working part time at a cell phone store. If you may remember those Nextel beep beep radios.
Hmm.
So this was a competitor to that called Southern Link, which was used by a lot of farmers. And so it was a horrible product. And I was working at this cell phone store, and a buddy of mine who worked in the insurance industry came by the office one day and was just like hanging out with me, and he watched me like sell like unit after unit of this absolutely terrible cell phone. And he was like, "Man, if you could sell this, you can sell insurance. Everybody has to buy insurance." And so I actually don't even remember quitting that job. They still might be wondering where I went, but I started with him working in the life and health industry, which was terrible. I don't recommend a lot of people work for the company I was working for. I wouldn't. I'm not going to say the name for obvious reasons, but went to work for them, sort of like an MLM setup. Door to door, cold calls, beneficiary reviews to get in front of you, that sort of thing. But I loved it because I felt like a professional. Like I could wear the sport coat, and it was not working in the heat. It was not digging ditches. It was not working in a cell phone store that had mold and that sort of thing. And I was really attracted to it. And it sort of came full circle with, what I said when I was 16, like, hey, these guys get to play golf. These other people don't. I'm going to do this. And so I did that for a few years. And then I recognized pretty quickly that property and casualty, at least from what I wanted, was really where it's at. I'm on the bottom floor of a high-rise building here, and we have a rooftop patio that we have access to. And I love taking new recruits up there that we're trying to convince them that insurance is cool. And I tell them, and we've got a great view of like the skyline here. Like every single building you can see, every single car that you can see, every single truck that you can see, every single piece of equipment, every boat, every ship is insured. And so, because of that aspect of the property and casualty industry, I was drawn to that. So I went to work for a State Farm agent for a year. Well, let me back up. I talk about how I quit college. Sorry, I forgot about that.
I
So I
like
was
that
I was
part.
going to school. I was going to school part time to be a teacher. I was working in insurance. I'd made like 50, 60 grand in my first 6 months selling insurance. And I was sitting in class and I remember I Googled what's the starting pay for a teacher in Alabama. Can't believe you think you would Google that before
Before.
you pick that major. And it was like $32,000. And I'm like, I just made double that in 6 months, really four times that if you amortize it out over a year. I'm like, why am I here? And I walked out of the classroom and never walked back in. Have not been back in a classroom since, unless it was to speak to students, which is kind of ironic. And so I went full bore into that. And then that's where we kind of get to the PNC. And so I was making really good money at the life insurance company. I quit to take a PNC job for a State Farm agent. My salary was $15,000 a year, and the commission wasn't great. So I really viewed it as like a sabbatical of, hey, I need to learn this. The opportunity's here. It's not where I'm at now. And I tell people that all the time, especially some of these young guys and gals coming right out of college. They think they're going to make 150 grand right away. Like you pull the slingshot back in order to propel the pebble forward. Like
Yeah,
sometimes you have to
it's a
take
great
steps
analogy.
back. It's the people who always want to get a raise. That's their only goal that end up getting stuck, but it's the people that are willing to take risk and move jobs and move careers and focus on things that have opportunity that end up ahead. There may be some down spikes, just like the stock market, but eventually you're going to move ahead because you're constantly chasing that opportunity, not just the pay raise, right? There's a million people out there that will take a job at a dead end company simply because it pays more, and that's not going to serve you, you know? So I did that for a year, really learned PNC. From there, I was hired by a company called Alpha Insurance, which is essentially Alabama's version of Farm Bureau. And they had an interesting model in that, and I think I've mentioned to you on our previous call, it was similar to like the Edward Jones kind of model where you're sort of set up like you're the agency owner. You can make 85, 90% of decisions in that sense. You're the agency principal, so to speak. But your neck's not on the line if something goes wrong. And so it was the perfect place for me at the time in that it paid well. There was a ton of opportunity. It's a company that's owned by farmers, right? They're not going to be the most tech savvy. So there's a ton of opportunity to make an impact at that company by doing things differently. And it let me sort of flex my muscles in terms of business ownership, learn how to run an agency, learn how to run meetings, learn how to organize my day without having to put a big investment up front, without having to go bankrupt if it doesn't work and that sort of thing. And when I was at that company, I've always been intrigued by advertising, even as a young teenager. Like, okay, what makes that ad work versus this ad and that sort of thing, you know? And so I'm at this company, I'm running this agency, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, like how can I get ahead of my competition, right? The street that my office was on, there was our office, there was four State Farm offices. There were four farmers offices, two all states, and an independent. So we effectively refer to it as Insurance Row.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's more insurance offices on that street now than there were then. And so there's a ton of competition. And there's two ways to beat your competition in terms of marketing and advertising, in my opinion. You can outspend them. Okay, so that's State Farm and Geico and Allstate doing Super Bowl commercials. You know, you can outspend people or you can out strategize them. And and so how you out strategize them is you look at, okay, what's my competition not doing where there is attention? Okay. And so
Yeah.
back then, a lot of these companies had tons of compliance around social media. And so none of these guys and gals were doing social media. They were doing radio, billboard, TV, direct mail, which are the three or four most expensive forms of advertising you could possibly imagine. And nobody was doing social media, and social media was free essentially. And so I went full bore into social media, and got a ton of attention very quick. Started kind of became the insurance guy for the area, and all this cost me was my time, right? That I didn't have. If you look at my content until about March of 2020, everything I've ever put out before March of 2020 was 100% done by me. I didn't have anybody creating it. I didn't have anybody editing the videos. I learned how to do it all. I don't recommend really doing that now because there's such a plethora of resources out there, especially
All the
with the
tools.
AI stuff now. But it really kind of gave me a sense of like the cadence for social media and how it can change and that sort of thing. And so fast forward, and I remember a story that this you'll think this is funny. So part of the deal at Alpha is you shared the office with another agency principal, and the other guy was the exact opposite of me, right? Super old school, thought everything I was doing was dumb. Fast forward a couple years later, he actually came to me and asked me to help him with his
Of
social
course.
media. I'm like,
Of
funny how the
course.
tides turn.
Yep. See,
And
it's working.
so the one of the very first pieces of content I ever put out was a pic. You remember how on Snapchat back in the day you could do the filters on your face? Okay, so Taco Bell put one out on Cinco de Mayo and it turned your face into a taco. So I literally just took a picture of that, posted it on Facebook, and said, "We need to talk about your insurance." Just a silly, funny, goofy post. And the guy who was in the office with me was like, "You're an idiot. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." He wasn't being funny. He's like, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. This delegitimizes what we do as insurance professionals, et cetera, et cetera." I remember feeling pretty down. Well, a couple of days later, I was at the office on a Saturday working, and I called like a local pizza place to deliver me a pizza. And I gave the guy my name, and he said, "Oh, you're the we need to talk about your insurance guy. I saw that post. That was hilarious." And it gave me like all of the validation I
Oh
needed.
yeah.
And then in that moment, I realized, like, wait a minute, this guy who shares the office with me, who also sells the exact same product that I sell, is literally never going to buy insurance from me ever because he also sells it. Why do I care what his opinion is? This other guy who is a potential customer thought it was hilarious and it got his attention. And so I'd like to tell that story for people. I think there's a lot of people that have things to say that would be valuable in the marketplace that are too scared of what their peers will think about them. And your peers are going to hate it because they're jealous that they're not doing it. But secretly, that's what it is, you know. But I went, head on into content and that sort of thing. And fast forward to 2017, the only thing I really had not done was podcasting. And at the time, there was a barrier of entry to podcasting. There still kind of is to some degree. You have to have some pretty expensive equipment to do it right. And uh, my now co host with the podcast, he reached out to me on Snapchat. I had a pretty big following on Snapchat. And he was like, "Hey, I'm going to be down in Mobile." And he's up in Huntsville, which is 6 hours from me, even though we're in the same state. We're 6 hours apart and might as well be a different state. And he's like, "I'm going to be down at the beach. My office is not far from the beach." He's like, "I'm going to be down at the beach." He's like, "I'd love to swing by your office and record some content." Which at the time, like, I get one of those requests a week. At the time, that was like, I couldn't believe there's somebody else in insurance who wants to create. Yeah, let's do it. So
Yeah.
he came by the office. He was doing a YouTube show at the time called Ask the Insurance Guy, where he would just like sit down with somebody in his community and just chop it up. I think one of the smartest things somebody can do too, by the way, is create like a local podcast. But we sat down in my office and we recorded like an hour, hour and a half of us just like riffing on insurance. And it's that video is still on YouTube. Actually, I was wearing a suit. I can't believe I wore a suit every day back then. But at the end of it, as soon as the camera stopped rolling, he was like, "Man, we should do a podcast." And I think my response was, "If you pay for it, I'll do it." So it was really his project initially that he was letting me tag along for. And so the first podcast went great. The second podcast, everything that could have possibly went wrong. So much so, I was engaged at the time, so much so that it made me late for premarital counseling with my wife's pastor, who also happened to be her grandfather.
Oh boy.
not good. And she didn't know I started a podcast. And so that was a nice little
It's a nice way to
explanation that
start
had to
that
happen
off.
after. Yeah, it was not, didn't think that through. And and so we reached out to a local guy here, Johnny Gwynn, who had a business that he was essentially a podcast producer. And I still think he's one of the best in the country that does that. And he's still our producer to this day. And he sort of took us to the next level in terms of, okay, like here's how to shape your message, here's the equipment you need, here's how to structure your show. Some of the stuff we listened to, some of it we didn't. Um, but our strategy initially, and I'm assuming you're doing that a little bit, this a little bit too, is like, we reached out to people that we wanted to be connected with, that I wanted to have a conversation with, as an excuse to talk to them selfishly. Like, for example, Tom Hegna is a huge name in the life and health space. Everybody knows the name Tom Hegna. He's written several best-selling books, no telling how many, tens of thousands of dollars to speak and consulting and that sort of thing. He was one of our first guests. I reached out. If I reach out to Tom and say, hey, I want 30 minutes of your time, he's probably going to say no or try to charge me. But if I reach out and say, hey, I want to host you on my podcast to promote your message and your brand, there back then people wouldn't say no to that. Now, obviously, everybody in the world has a podcast, so you get less yeses now, but it still works. And so the byproduct of us interviewing these awesome people that we wanted to be connected with is people started listening. And so, sorry, it's a long story, but
No, it's great.
from there, people started listening. We started getting invited into some rooms that we probably didn't deserve to, but they let us in because of the podcast. And um, I started trying to implement some of the things that I learned through this podcast in my agency at the time, which was still that captive agency. And I met a lot of corporate red tape. But we did succeed with some things, but it's just, when you're at corporate, it's just difficult. And so in January of 2019, I quit to start my own agency because I was like, I can't breathe knowing that we're not doing things the right way. And I would rather make less money and do things the way that I want to do them than make more money and work somewhere where I feel trapped. And so I quit January the 8th of 2019 because I got paid on January 7th. Um, March the 1st of 2019, we officially opened Portal Insurance, and it's been off to the races since then. Best practices agency, we just got named that this year. Uh, you know, in the probably top 20 largest agencies in Alabama, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been difficult, but it's been a lot of fun. So
It's awesome.
believe it or not, that's the quick story.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a lot of heart. You're putting in the effort, you put in time, you got creative, you identified opportunities that other people weren't identifying, and you grabbed it and did
Yeah.
it. I mean, that's a huge success story. That's a huge motivational story for people that are feeling like, man, I got to do something different. It's find that difference and go for it.
Yeah, I think too, it's like it's look for the either the arbitrage or the opportunity in the market. Who's being underserved. So like with us with Portal, and every insurance market is different, right? I've got friends in other parts of the country that it's a completely different world than it is here. You know, for us here, what we recognized initially when we started Portal is you had two types of independent agencies here. You had the very old school, either family agencies or uh, big corporate owned alphabet shop agencies that are like, their agency name is 15 last names and associates. And
Because I
and
can't agree.
if your account is less than 5K in revenue, they're not interested in talking to you. By the way, respect that. Those of you that can get away with doing that and not hurting the customer experience, I'm all for it. And then the other type of independent agencies you had were like the non-standard auto bucket shops. And so what happened is that created a vacuum where all of the captive agencies got the really good personal lines business. Okay. Combined with the fact that the independent agencies actually had a leg up on personal lines in this market. Nobody was really paying attention to it. Combined with the fact that this is a coastal market, So a good personal lines account can be a couple thousand in revenue very easily. Okay. So what we did when we started is we said, hey, we're not going to compete with these guys. We're not going to compete with these guys. We're going to compete with the captives. And so I think anybody who's starting an agency or looking to grow their agency or any business is like, look for that little pocket in the market that's being underserved,
Yeah,
that there's
specialized.
plenty of and there has to be opportunity, but and we did the same thing a year in, and this was always the plan. A year in, we transitioned to doing more commercial, and we did the same thing there. One of the first things we started doing, and we still do it to this day, are trucking companies. And we specifically target the smaller 25 and less trucks because the big trucking agencies aren't interested in them. The small guys who don't do a ton of trucking don't really have the skill set to do that, and we were like, okay, we're going to provide the same level of service and the same bells and whistles that the big guys do to these really small guys that have 10 trucks. And it's still a great size account. I mean, a 10 truck account can easily be 25K a truck, you know? And so I think it's just looking for that little seam, looking for that little opportunity that you can say, okay, this is where we're going to plant our flag and do it better than everybody else.
Yeah, that's really really good tips. So, I mean, and you touched on, I was going to ask you, the main difference that you believe Portal has in the industry, and I mean, it sounds a lot like it's that personalized approach. It's that hyper focus on customer experience. So, from your perspective, what would you say are your big pillars that are going to be different for you guys compared to the competitor?
Yeah. So, number one, I view most companies are you've got a CEO, the workers work for the CEO, and then you got the customers down here. Okay. Um, the way that I view things is I work for my people, they work for the customers.
Yeah, service leadership.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just like for example, um, this might be getting too personal, but I was having a conversation with my leadership team last week about a great employee that um, had made a few mistakes on some things. And I was one of the managers I was talking to on the leadership team is a newish manager. And so there's a lot of coaching, and I'm not a perfect manager. In fact, I think I'm really bad in a lot of ways. But but I was like giving this person some coaching as to how to approach this company. I was like, look, you need to approach this like, what can we do better to keep you from doing this again?
Yeah,
Not you did this, you know what I mean? And so
right, right.
that's the way we try to view things. Um, I will say, we've gone through I mean, we're not perfect. Like we do a workshop in our office once a quarter. We bring other agencies in and we just teach them our way.
Oh wow.
It's a way for me to flex my speaking muscles without having to travel, basically. We've got one coming up in October. We're actually giving all the money to charity for that one. It's not a money making thing for us. It's just something we like doing, and we get better either from learning from the attendees
Yeah,
or sometimes when you're speaking about your processes publicly, you're like, oh, wow, here's a better thing we could do, or hey, here's a
right.
hole,
Kind of hash out your thoughts a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And one of the things I start every workshop with is, hey, we're not perfect. We got a lot of issues, but we recognize that we have those issues and we're constantly trying to fix them. So, from a customer experience standpoint, it was probably a little better in 2019 because we could focus more on a few amount of customers. We've obviously grown, you know. But I look at it that way. Every decision we make, I tell this to our carriers. Um, the way we place a risk with a carrier is what's best for the risk, number one. But really nowadays it's a very even playing field. The number two or the number one B reason we place somebody with a specific carrier is ease of use. Because if you make it easy on us, we can make it easy on the customer. So our whole philosophy around customer experience is how can we possibly make this as frictionless as possible for the customer? Now, insurance is a very difficult thing to buy in most cases. It's never going to be perfect, but what can we do slightly better than the competition that makes things easier? And I think one big part of that is our technology. We use a lot of technology to enhance not so much enhance the customer experience directly, but indirectly. We use technology to make things easier on us so that we can then make things easier on our customers. And then lastly, honestly, man, it's my podcast. Like, because of the podcast, we get access to carriers earlier than most agencies. I can probably name 5 or 6 carriers here just in the last 2 years that we were the first agency they appointed in Alabama. And they may not be appointing us because of the podcast, but I may have found out about them because of the podcast. And then it's getting access to technology tools that other people don't have access to people, access to resources, and this is one way it indirectly benefits customers. So one of my people came in here a couple months ago with a problem that I'd never dealt with before. And I was just silent looking at her with like a blank stare. And she said, what, are you having a stroke? What's going on? And I said, no, I'm going through my mental Rolodex of who do I know that's dealt with this problem before. Whereas other agencies might be calling Johnny down the street. I'm like, hey, here's a agency that does 50 million in revenue. Let me call him. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's really those 3 or 4 things that it's not a silver bullet. It's a bunch of really, really small bullets that collectively make things better. And then you're just honestly constantly looking at ways to get better. I'm never going to be a rest on my laurels kind of guy. Like, there's always something to fix. There's always something to do better. And um, you know, our office, you can't see it because it's on the other side of the camera. Our office is like a white industrial building. And every couple of years, I'll get somebody to come in and put like some kind of decal, or an artist come in and paint a mural on the inside, as I wanted it to feel like an art piece. And one of my next one's going to be the phrase "the way we've always done it," with a huge like bullseye
X
red
through it.
X through it.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly. Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about like putting yourself out of business. Like, we're constantly looking at, hey, is there a better way to do this, even though it's completely different than what we're doing now? And don't fall in love with the version of yourself now.
Yeah. Continue to evolve for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, so based on your experiences and some of the things that you've been into, what would you say is like your proudest moment so far with the company?
Oh, I like that question. I wish I'd have known that one was coming. Um,
Sorry.
no, you're good. Probably being named a best practices agency this year was a big deal, is a big deal. And for those of you that don't know, maybe some of the listeners, so Best Practices is run by 2 organizations. Reagan Consulting um, puts out, administers the program, and then it's co-sponsored by the Big I, which is our association. And it's not, there's a lot of awards out there, man, that are just like, you pay this money, you get this.
Yeah,
You
pay to
know,
win.
the Best Practices is not that at all. I mean, they rip your agency apart, and you have to send them all kind of financial documents. You have to send them proof. You have to send them process procedure stuff, book size, employee age, how long they've been. I mean, it takes, and I'm pretty on top of my stuff. It took me probably 2 months to send all the stuff. And so it's a true legitimate vetting process. And then what they do is, um, of all the agencies in the country, they only select about 300. So that's a huge deal to be in that group of 300. And then what they do with the people who are selected to be designated best practices, um, they put a report out that shows
Based on
all of
everything you
this
sent,
data
right?
anonymized. And
Wow.
so that is the report that other agencies use so like if you go hire, say, a CFO, they're going to pull stuff from the best practices report and say, okay, this is what we need to pay for this, or salary ranges, growth rates. And one of our missions here at Portal is to effectively change the way independent agencies operate in the future, and be the gold standard. And so being named a best practices agency was not only the first step, but sort of validating
Hmm.
um, for that. So that was a pretty big deal for me to get that the first time we tried. And we were That it, it actually came in a week that was an absolutely terrible week. And every problem feels like the worst problem in the world when you're in the middle of it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it came at a time where it's like, man, I feel like I needed to see this today, but also it's not one of those things. We're not like, you know, uh, okay, we're stopping here. It's okay, yeah, it's a cool thing, and now we're gonna move on to the next thing. You know what I mean?
That's amazing, though. I mean, you're effectively, like you said, setting the gold standard, right? You're raising the bar, and this is how things need to work. This is where you need to play at if you want to do a good job. That's really good.
Yeah,
That's really really
exactly.
good.
And then what's cool too is when you win that award, you can then go into a database where you can compare your results to other people. So you can kind of see like, okay, in this one category, we're grossly behind, so we need to improve. So it kind of paints this picture of you of like, I would encourage everybody, even if you don't think you would win it, to apply for that so you can just get access to the data. It's
Yeah,
a really, really
good
neat thing that they
benchmark
put
point,
on.
right?
And honestly, I remember being a young guy like in 2019 thinking, oh, this is BS. There's nothing to this. And then when I applied for it, I'm like, oh wow, this is actually a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the best parts is that it's not pay to win, right? It's actual sweat equity that's measured, and then that, like you said, the reports put out for it. That's incredible.
Yeah, and then there's other awards too, man, that yeah, there's a metric you have to hit, but they never ask for proof. You know what I mean? There's
But you're
awards out there.
providing like a set of data that they're reviewing ultimately, right? I mean, that's the proof.
There's some well-known awards. There's some well-known awards out there that it's like you have to have this amount of whatever revenue or net revenue or
Hmm.
whatever, and they just take your word for it because they just want your money. Yeah, there's some of that kind of stuff. Whereas with the best practices, it's like it's so in depth you can't fake it. If you were trying to fake it, they would be able to tell immediately, and then they ask for proof and all that sort of stuff. And that's not to crap on any, like, I don't blame people, honestly, even like the pay for play awards, right? I don't blame people at all for doing that because it creates social proof for you.
Right, right. And you put
You know what I
something on your
mean?
wall,
Like,
right?
yeah, exactly. I do not blame people at all. And it depends on the intent of why you're doing it, right? If it's ego, then yeah, that's not good. But if it's, hey, I need this to create social proof with my clients, like, let's get after it. It actually goes back to like moving the conversation forward. It actually goes back to like when people reach out to me. Let's say you've got some kid in the insurance industry that's worked for an agency forever, and he reaches out to me or she reaches out to me and it's like, hey, I want to start my own agency. I always go back to, okay, what's the reason? I think if the
It's got
reason
to be
is,
golf. It's got to be golf.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think if the reason is you want to make money or your ego, those are the wrong reasons to start an agency. If the reason is I can't breathe unless I'm in charge calling all the shots, or I want to build legacy long term, I want to build something for my family that I can pass down or whatever. I think those are the right reasons, but just doing it because you want to make more money is because you're not going to make money in the first few years. I think that's something we have to look at in the industry is what's the reason for doing this? Because the fact of the matter is, man, there's a lot of agency owners out there that would be fantastic number twos at an agency, but unfortunately, they were not in a situation where there was the right agency to do that at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think COVID kind of helped us with that. Is COVID sort of got the powers that be in the insurance industry open to remote work, and so now there's way more opportunity. Like I had a guy actually. You're in Wisconsin? I had a guy apply for a job on my website that lives in Wisconsin this morning. So hopefully it doesn't work for you, but it's opened us up way more to things.
Yeah. So I mean, based on all of that, you talked about the things that you've had to get ready for, the things that you've discovered through this process. Has that identified? And you mentioned how you invite the other insurance agencies to talk about and share practices. What mistakes have you identified through all that, and have you had a chance to navigate those, and how did you do it?
Mistakes that we've made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or maybe yourself, however you want to.
So I don't have many regrets. I have two big ones though. Okay. The first one is going to seem harsh and greedy, but it's not. Before the listeners get pissed off and turn me off, let me explain. In the beginning, I gave too big of commission percentages to new producers.
Okay.
Okay. So when I was at Alpha, um, my support staff was not commissioned at all. And it was terrible
Okay.
because they made the same amount of money whether they performed great or not.
Right. No incentive.
Yes. Like we came up with this deal where they had to ask two people a day about life insurance. This is how they did it. Hey, do you have life insurance? Yes. Okay. Or
Do you have
no.
a Best Buy
Okay.
card?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so, because success was not tied to the outcome, they didn't care, right? And so when I started Portal, I was like, everybody's going to be merit based. Everybody's going to get paid some kind of commission from the receptionist to me, and I somewhat agree with that still, that everything should be merit based. But the other piece of that is people would come to us that like sold vacuum cleaners for a living and we wave the magic wand, congratulations, you're a producer, right? And the problem with that is, and here's why it's not greedy or selfish, is we had people who were not ready to go primarily commission based in the beginning that failed because of that. What we
Okay.
do now is if you come to us, if you're not a full-fledged producer at another agency, and you come to us and you want to work for us, you have to start in service or you have to start in inside sales. Both are which essentially just salaried positions. Okay. The idea is you got to prove your worth and we've got to train you because I don't want you to. There are people that used to work here that failed because we set them up for failure by putting them directly into a producer role that was predominantly commission based and they weren't cut out for it. Whereas if we'd have started them in service or inside sales, now they have a path. So now what we do, so the last inside sales guy we hired, what we did for him is, okay, you're gonna do inside sales for 24 months. The biggest piece of failure that we have seen with new producers is they can't close. We're in a business that everybody buys our products. It's pretty easy to get people interested, but they didn't know how to ask for the sale. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're in the first 18 months, we're going to teach you how to close. How are we going to teach you how to close? We're going to send you so many DatGum deals that you just figure it out with some coaching, that you just figured out trial by fire, right? Um, the last 6 months, we're going to teach you how to prospect, and then you can go be a producer. So that I think that was probably the biggest mistake if I could go back, because what I didn't realize is those people at my prior agency weren't managed correctly. That's
Yeah.
why they didn't
So
care. You know what I mean? Which
no
was partly my
guidance, right?
fault. It's partly my fault, right? But there was only so much that corporate would let us do, you know. And I think the other mistake that I would have done differently, and this is going to seem so simple, it's going to seem so stupid simple, but this is something that just absolutely owns me. Um, so we give a disc assessment um, when we hire people. And initially, I hired a consultant who would help me read the tests and give me examples, and she charged a lot. And I think, man, I could find the perfect candidate, and this lady would just pick them apart,
Tear them
right? And I
apart.
think some
Okay.
of that was her trying to prove her worth because it was so expensive. But there were some people initially that I did not hire based on things in the personality assessment. And there's one guy in particular that I didn't hire based on the assessment that just crushing it at another agency that just owns me. And so now, and I recommend this to everybody, my attitude is we do not disqualify or qualify someone based on the personality assessment. The personality assessment is just a guide
A
to
little
get to
secondary
the
tech.
interview questions. It's what I literally do, man. This is one of the most practical uses for AI. So I built a GPT inside Chat GPT, um, with all of my current employees' assessments in there. when we're hiring somebody new, we put their assessment in
Right, the
there. We
fit.
say who are they going to work with, who are they not going to work with, etc. And then I say, based on their assessment, give me 10 interview questions that we need to ask. Tell me what a good answer would be, and tell me what a bad answer would be. So my leadership team, we're interviewing them. We have, here's the question, here's the answer we want, here's the answer we don't want. And but I tell candidates this when they take the test. You cannot be disqualified based on the test. The test is just a guide. That's how we get your interview questions. And honestly, it probably makes them answer it more straightforward than
Yeah,
trying to pick the right answer. And then we use it also once we hire them to see how they like to be managed and how they like to be motivated. Because there's some people that are motivated by money. There's some people that are motivated by altruism. There's some people that are motivated by learning. We do all that. And so I would say those are probably my two biggest regrets, not doing those two things earlier. Outside of that, man, like every failure, every mistake is just a
for sure.
learning opportunity. Like I'll give you one mistake that we made. So we wrote an account uh 2 years ago. It was the producer that wrote it was the biggest account she had ever written, and it was a trucking account, and um, we lost it the next year to a group captive that we just had no chance at competing against, and so we lost the account. And one of the things I learned in that is, so obviously it's kind of devastating to lose a high revenue account, right? And so it happened in November. Well, I have a fractional CFO that I work with. Okay, in December, she and I set the budget for the next year. Okay. In fact, we're actually preparing for it right now. And I was talking to Aaron Gordon, who's somebody you should definitely have on. His dad was one of the wisest people I've ever met. And we were talking one day, and he just blurted this out. He said, yeah, my dad always used to say, the small accounts pay the bills, the big accounts pay the vacations. So I went back to my CFO and I said, hey, here's what I want to do. We're doing this budgeting now. Every account that's over X amount of revenue, we're going to pretend like we don't have those accounts. So we're going to base the budget on the
Yep,
stuff we
yep,
know has an 85 to 90% chance of renewing.
yeah.
And then if these bigger accounts renew, then we just do that much better. So that's
Right.
like one like mistake where we lost an account that actually ended up being super profitable for us because of that.
Yeah.
So I look at every mistake, maybe not in the moment, but every mistake in the aftermath of like, okay, what did we learn from this and how can we be better at this?
Yeah, that's impressive though. I mean, recognizing that and then swapping over to essentially basing it off existing retention and higher rates. That's really great.
We,
So
we, we play in an industry of CYAs and worst case scenarios. You know
yep,
what I mean? That's
yep,
everything we're doing, we're trying to cover our butt, and then we're trying to say, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, if we're okay with the worst case scenario, it's like, we bought an agency 2 years ago, and I'm not like a debt guy. I pay cash for all my cars. At the time, the only debt I had was my house, and I had have a business credit card to pay off every month, but I had to get a loan to buy this agency, and it made me super uncomfortable. And so I essentially did the math and I said, okay, if we lost 80% of these accounts, I could still pay the note. I wouldn't make any money on it, but I could still pay the note.
yeah,
And I'm not going to lose 80% of the accounts. All right, let's go.
yeah,
So I try to tell people, like, man, run everything through a worst case, a reasonable worst case. And if you have high functioning anxiety like me, it's very easy to imagine the worst case scenario.
yeah. There's tools for that now, but
Yeah.
that's great. Awesome. So looking ahead for you guys, what's the not maybe not necessarily the game plan, but what's the vision for next 2, 3, 5 years out?
Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed every answer I have two questions, or every question I have two answers for.
It's great.
But I'm big on looking at what people more successful than me have done, and then either copying that or
Yep.
creating my own version of that. Okay. Like, for example, literally this week, we need to, we do more new business sales than anybody else in this area. But compared to the agency size now, we could do a lot better. And one thing that we've never done is we've never had like a true sales process. Like, here's our process, and we have process for everything else, but we've always just been really like naturally good at sales, and we generate so many leads that it doesn't matter. But I'm looking at, okay, how can we like double our sales next year? Okay, I think the answer is let's build a true blue sales process that you follow this. Here's the scripting, all of that. So I'm actually flying. I've got a buddy whose agency does about $1 million in new business every single month, and he's 100% personal lines. He's in Jacksonville, Florida. I was like, hey, I'm going to fly to your office, and I just want to spend a day with you learning your process. And then I'm going to come back and use that as the guide to build our process. So I love looking at people more successful than me and figuring out my version of that. And so one of the things that we looked at, so if you look at Insurance Journal puts out a list every year, it's top 100 independent agencies in the country. Okay. So I actually tweeted out a couple weeks ago that I was looking for a top 100 agency that got to the top 100 only through organic sales, no acquisitions. You know how many out of the top 100 there were that we found?
Two,
One.
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 Yeah,
There
yeah.
might be another one, but we found one. So all of these guys, and we're having that guy on the podcast actually because I want to learn from him. But all of the big players in our industry got big through M&A. Okay. Now, it is my opinion that none of these folks are actually good at organic growth. The only way they know how to grow is acquiring, which is fine. I totally get it. They do write new business, but a lot of times they get their new business from osmosis. They're just so
They're
big
so
that it
big, right?
naturally comes in the door. And there's, they could probably spend no money on advertising and just cross sell their book and write enough business to make me and you drool, right? Which is why hardly none of them advertise, which is why, you know, Acrisure or Hub or PCF or any of these guys aren't household names in the mainstream, and State Farm, Allstate, and Progressive are, right? And so what we said a couple of years ago is, hey, we're going to do both. We're really good at organic growth. We're going to grow organically, and we're going to acquire. So like that's sort of our long-term philosophy. As far as long-term goal, our goal is to get as big as we possibly can, as responsibly as possibly can. You know, it would be easy for me to go get a loan and hire 1,000 salespeople. Like, yeah, you're going to grow, but is that responsible? So our thing has always been, let's be financially sound, but let's also push for growth. And so that's my deal. I have no like exit goals or anything like that. I mean, I think everybody has a number that they would consider it. Well, I'm a long way from getting somebody to offer me that number, but I may have shared this with you, but I went to an event the other night, and I was standing about 10 feet from one of the only billionaires in Alabama. And he was like 70 years old, still the CEO of his company. And the thought that popped into my head in that moment was the reason he's a billionaire is because he's owned this forever. Not that I want to be a billionaire. Obviously, I'd be happy with it. I'm sure you would be too, but that's not like a goal. Um, the people who I think are the most respected and the most successful just own things forever. If you just buy things and hold on to them forever, it's going to work out and make good decisions along the way. So
That's the key. So making the good decisions.
making the good decisions, and you don't put all the chips in the middle of the table at once too.
For sure. For sure. Piece by piece.
Have you some outs, and I would rather be a little bit smaller and do it responsibly than not. I was talking to a business owner who is, I think, 50 times our size a couple months ago, and the company was not profitable.
Too
And he
big.
was like, I would swap places with you in a heartbeat. And I'm like, yeah, I probably would swap places with me too, you know? So it's, and that's why, like, I've been involved. I do some investing in insure tech, and I've built some tech and stuff. And we built a piece of tech a couple years ago that we considered turning into a company. But I did not want to be the CEO of it. I'm like, I'm not built to be the CEO of a company. It's like, hey, this is how much of a runway we have. If we don't do this by this, we're going to go out of business. I can't deal with that. I'm fine being the investor for that, but I can't be the person that heads that up, you know?
So interesting that you mentioned tech and then growing, and you're going out to, you said, Jacksonville to essentially learn. How much of that do you think is going to require either like change in, because you said sales process, right? That's gonna be what you're gonna be writing. But what are you thinking about in terms of not just sales process, but what either tools or implementations or things that you think you might have to either reconsider? Like how much of it, you mentioned, you built a GPT to help your team become more effective and more efficient. So where do you see the company, marrying the plethora of tools that are out there these days? And you said you built tech, so you've got some experience in that. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that's sort of a crystal ball kind of question because we really don't know what's coming. You know what I mean? What I look for in tech, I think too many business owners, period, but especially insurance, get caught up in shiny object syndrome. And a lot of times are implementing tools that may solve one problem but cause another one on the
Yeah,
back end,
for sure,
you
for
know?
sure. Not the
Um,
holistic view of it.
Correct. And so like the two filters I run tech through, I think multiple entry is the ultimate death of the independent agency. We've got to eliminate multiple entry.
What do you mean by
And
that?
so I put some data in one tech platform and then I have to go put it in this
Do it
platform.
again.
And then I have
Okay,
to put it
so
in this one.
it's not
I need I
cohesive.
need I need it to be cohesive and I need it to flow. So we look for A, does it eliminate multiple entry? And then B, does it send the data to and from our other tools? Like there's tools out there that are great that we don't use because it doesn't do that. It's why I'm a little bit underwhelmed with some of the insurance AI stuff that's out there right now. And there's some really good tools that I'm involved with. But show me how to connect this platform to this platform without having these two companies have to be okay with it. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and so I think that's where we are moving into is okay, what kind of tools can we adopt, whether they're insurance specific or not, that allow us to flow information to and from a lot faster? You know what I mean? Like one tool I'm looking at heavily right now that I'm not involved with at all, but I'm just a customer is a company called Axiom, which allows you to basically build um, sort of like custom RPAs to run reports and do tasks for you in the
Sure.
background of your computer.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of like we've got a few carriers, man, that like if a customer's going to cancel, they don't notify us. We have to go to their website, we have to log in, we have to click on a report, we have to pull it, and we have to send it to
That
people for
should
it to
be
go to. Well,
automated, right?
can I build something that'll go in there and do that for me instead of me paying somebody $30 an hour to do it?
Yeah, for
Things
sure.
like that. I could see us one day possibly building our own system versus using third party tools. You look at some of the most successful agencies in the country, a lot of them are doing that, and it makes them more valuable because they have this piece of proprietary tech
Yep.
and that
And
sort of
then you
thing.
can edit it as
Now,
you see fit.
and I'm a long way from that. You know, the tool we built a few years ago is we built our own rater. We built our own personalized rater, and uh, it was very challenging, but we pulled it off. And we actually, and this is back to like put yourself out of business. We actually sunsetted it because we came across a third party tool that was way better. And so we went and it's still the Radar's still functional. If anybody out there wants to buy it, it's still functional. But we found something better. So I have some experience in building tech. Now I'm a long way from writing a check for $5 million to build our own AMS and that sort of thing. But I could see us doing that, down the road one day.
It's interesting. I'd be curious to see what those workflows look like for you. Now, have you guys ever hashed that out or mapped out, like, we have this tool who I wish would talk to this tool because we do it like this now? Have you gone and connected those dots, or created some sort of image of where you believe that should flow?
Yeah, right now we really don't use anything that doesn't talk to something else. Most of our stuff is very cohesive. The other thing too is, and that's kind of where the podcast comes into play. Um, a lot of newer companies come to me first because they want exposure on the podcast, and I can leverage that to get them to build it how I want. Because it's much easier to convince a company to make a change when they're brand new and it's just a founder and a CTO versus a large company.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like we're using a tool now that's brand new called Customer IQ that if you're familiar with Superhuman, it's essentially Superhuman, but it lives in your Gmail, so you don't have to be on a different UI. They came to us, wanted us to be a customer, wanted to do something with the podcast, and I was like, "Hey, I want you to build these features, and we'll use." And we're now implementing that in the agency. So a lot of times, by the time my team gets their hands on a new tool, we've already sort of molded what we think we want. The flip side of that is probably nobody talks to more independent agencies than I do. So I can give some of these folks a lot of really good advice. A lot of times what I'm asking for is what other people are going to ask for. You know what I mean? And so it helps them in that regard. But as far as like mapping stuff out, not necessarily. Now I know with like the Raider, we did a lot of that, and we what we did when we built it is we built in a lot of features that agents would want that tech companies wouldn't necessarily know agents would want. So an example of that would be when you're filling out an application, say for homeowners insurance, there's about 80 questions. Okay. About
A lot.
60 of those 80 questions are going to be the same answer every single time. And so what we did is we said, hey, we want it to, not only do we want it to just pre-answer these questions for us, we don't even want the person who's quoting to see those questions. They're still there. They can still get to them in the rare case that the answer might change, right? So it was like, let's simplify this
Condensed and hidden.
process.
Right.
Correct. And I demoed it for a buddy of mine who built a Raider and he sold it to a big company. And he was like, man, I wish we'd have thought of these things. But because we were not in the business, we can't think of things that way. And it's why, like, when people come to me, Customer IQ is a good example. When he came to me, he has no experience in the insurance industry. And I was like, hey, the number one thing you need to do if you are a founder and you or your co-founder do not have actual hands in the dirt insurance experience is you need to put together like an agents advisory council that can help you can guide you and hey, this is it can even down to like messaging, right? But especially like the way the tech works is like this is what agents are going to want and need. You know what I mean? Because people get a lot of ideas that aren't right. You know, another company I'm heavily involved with is a company called Ascend, and does a lot of stuff around like bookkeeping and that sort of thing. But when they first launched, we put an ad for them on the podcast, and in the ad, I called them a premium finance company, which was the main thing that they did. And they were like, "Well, we don't like that. We want you to say that we help speed up receivables." And I'm like, "If you do not call yourself a premium finance company, agents are not going to know what you do." You know, you can't put the Silicon Valley tech spin where I have to spend 15 minutes on your website and I don't understand what you're doing.
Right. No one
You
wants,
know what I
especially
mean?
these days, nobody wants that. We want to know what's going on right
Yeah,
away.
exactly. Exactly. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I think outside of the industry, tech companies that are coming into the industry need that agent perspective on to know how to deliver it in a way that everybody understands
Yeah, those are really good tips. I'd be curious to dive into that more. Maybe another one.
it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really want to be respectful of your time as well. I appreciate everything you've shared with me today, and everyone that's going to be listening. So, to kind of wrap it up, where can people find you? What's the website?
The best way to get in touch with me is probably Instagram or Facebook DM. I'm Bradley Flowers on both of them. My website is the agency website is portalinsurance.com. Um, please don't submit a quote request to say that you want to talk to me. That happens all the time, and I hate that. I would just DM me on social. And then the workshop info, if anybody's interested in the workshop, every time we do one of those, man, I say it's going to be the last one. But the workshop is portalinsurance.com/ under the hood.
Under the
And we
hood.
actually have, feel free to edit this out if you don't want me to drop this on here. We actually have a digital version of the workshop because I understand that a lot of times people can't travel and that sort of thing. You got kids and responsibilities or whatever. So we actually, on that same page, we have a digital version of the workshop that's essentially recorded sessions A little bit different from the in-person because the in-person is sort of tailored to, we have everybody fill out an extensive survey before they come. So we tailor it to their problems. But the digital version kind of gives you an idea and some good stuff to see, quote unquote, under the hood of our agency. So those are all the best ways to get in touch with me. And my email is bradley@portalinsurance.com.
Awesome. Bradley, huge thank you. Really, really appreciate your time sharing all the knowledge.
All right, man. I appreciate it. I'll come back
Awesome.
anytime.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.